Here's a pattern I've watched play out more than once. A senior developer scopes a workflow editor for the roadmap, and with today's AI tooling, the working prototype lands in about a week. You can drag nodes around, connect them, save the JSON, and the demo looks great. Then, 3 months later, the cracks start to show. The auto layout breaks past 80 nodes, Edge starts crossing straight through nodes once they have custom sizes. The properties panel doesn't match your design system, and adding one new node type means touching 7 files. Because nobody on the team had built a diagramming tool before. If you've seen that happen on your team or someone else's, this one's for you. I want to walk through 3 things. What build it yourself actually delivers in 2026, now that AI shrinks the first version from weeks to days, when buying an SDK is the better bet, and when building from scratch is still the right call. No sales pitch, I just want to show you where the real gap sits. Someone on the roadmap wants a visual workflow editor. Drag and drop nodes, connected logic, the ability for your users to build their own automations inside your product. The conversation usually turns to build versus buy, and it looks like a clean binary. You build it on reactflow, which is MIT licensed, free, and your team already knows React, especially now that AI agents can scaffold the first version in days. Or you pay a vendor for something like an NA10 style platform, around $50,000 a year, with limited control over the UX. Most teams pick build. The cost looks lower, the customization ceiling looks higher, and AI makes it feel even safer, because the first prototype shows up so fast that the gap stays invisible for a while. That framing misses a third path. You can build on an workflow SDK, a layer that sits on top of reactflow and ships the parts you'd otherwise write yourself. You get the same UX control as a from-scratch build, without taking the multi-year extensibility and maintenance bet on alone. And this is the part that actually changed in 2026. With AI, the interesting question is no longer how fast you ship the first version. That's just not the constraint anymore. The real question is what happens 12 months in, when you need a 14th node type, a redesign, a mobile pass, a performance fix. Is it code your team understands? Will the people who vibe coded the canvas still be the ones maintaining it? So it isn't really build or buy. It's build from primitives, buy a SaaS platform, or buy an SDK and customize. I'll go through each, starting with what building it yourselves actually gives you. reactflow is an excellent diagramming library. Out of the box you get pan zoom, node rendering, drag to connect, and basic edges. The Pro tier adds more advanced things like obstacle-aware edge routing. So this really isn't 2022 anymore. The library has grown into a strong foundation. What reactflow doesn't ship, on purpose, because it's a library and not a product, is everything wrapped around the canvas. A configurable palette your users drag from, a properties sidebar that renders the right form for each node type, design system integration so that the editor doesn't look like a third-party widget glued onto your product, a plugin architecture, so a new feature request doesn't mean forking the canvas. Validation, undo, redo, copy-paste. The performance work. The drag and drop UX. Those are the parts your team builds. AI helps with them a lot, but it won't tell you which UX patterns hold up at 500 nodes and which ones fall apart, because that knowledge isn't sitting in the training data the way React boilerplate is. 2 years ago, I'd have stood here and told you building from scratch takes 4 to 6 months and costs somewhere between 80k and 150k. That argument just doesn't hold in 2026. Today, a competent React team plus AI agents can ship a working workflow editor demo in a week, maybe 2 if they're careful. The timeline gap between build and buy has mostly closed, or at least narrowed enough that time to first demo isn't where you should be making this call anymore. So where is the decision made right now? It comes down to 4 things. Production quality. reactflow's performance is good on its own. What kills it is how you wired it in your state. One careless re-render, one stale closure node handler, and your 500 node diagram drops from 60 FPS to a slideshow. The library can't protect you from that. It's not its job. It's on whoever integrates it. AI scaffolds the version that works in the demo. It doesn't catch the re-render that ships to production. Extensibility. The first AI build version works fine. Then, the product team comes back 6 months later, wanting conditional branches, validation, new node types, a redesigned properties panel. And now you're iterating on code AI wrote in a week. without the architectural decisions you'd have made if you were building for the long haul. I've watched this happen more than once. The first version ships fast, and every change after that costs more than it should. UX depth. Copy-paste, undo-redo, dragging from palette, snap to grid, reshaping edges, different properties for each type of node. Every one of these feels obvious in hindsight and is genuinely fiddly to get right. Your team will solve all of them. The question is just whether that's where you wanted their time going, instead of into your actual product. And maintenance. AI-built code tends to be easy to ship and harder to extend, because the architecture is whatever the model happened to pick in the moment, not what your team would have chosen if they were thinking about year 3. This is what production-ready actually looks like in practice. A configurable palette on the left, where your users drag node types onto the canvas. A properties sidebar on the right that's schema-driven, with a different form for each node type, plus validation and conditional fields. This is the part most people miss when they're evaluating reactflow. The canvas itself is a solved problem. It's the application around the canvas, the palette, the properties, the layout, the tooling. That takes time. Workflow Builder ships this out of the box, configurable per node type. You define the schema, and the editor renders the form. The palette works the same way. Configure it once, and your users drag from it. If you build it yourself, you'll get there, and it will work. The cost was never the form library. It's the design decisions, the edge cases, fitting it into your design system, and the maintenance, every single time you add node type. Quick word on edge routing, since it's one of the differences people bring up most, even though it's not the whole story. On the left, basic edge handling. On the right, obstacle-aware routing. For a workflow editor, this is really a quality of life feature. For tools where routing is the product, electrical schematics, network diagrams, it would be a genuine buying decision. For workflows, it's just one of the many pieces you get when you don't build the whole thing yourself. There are two costs the spreadsheet never shows, and they apply whether you build it in a week with AI or a quarter without it. The first is opportunity cost. A senior engineer spending 4 weeks or 4 months on a Canvas integration isn't spending that time on the thing that actually sets your product apart. If the workflow editor isn't your moat, every cycle there is a cycle a competitor put into something that moves their deals. The second is maintenance lock-in. Whoever ships the first version owns it. If that's your team, the canvas turns into a permanent line on every quarterly roadmap. New node types, design system updates, performance regressions, accessibility work. Each one reopens code that takes real context to navigate. With an SDK, that's somebody else's problem. Built from reactflow when the editor is an internal prototype, an admin tool, or a narrow utility where polish is genuinely optional. AI makes this faster than ever. If good enough for internal use is the bar, you can ship in days. Also built when the workflow editor is your product, not a feature inside it, because then the canvas is your differentiator and you should own every line of it. And built when you need an interaction model so specific that any SDK would just get in your way. Buy a SaaS platform, something like an n8n embed, when standardized automation flows are enough and you don't need custom UX or branded nodes. When your users are technical and fine with vendor UI, when $50,000 a year recurring is acceptable, and when being locked into the vendor's visuals, branding, and roadmap works for your business. Buy an SDK like Workflow Builder when you're embedding the editor as a customer-facing feature in your product. When quality matters, performance at scale, UX polish, fitting your design system. When you know you'll keep adding node types for years and want a clean place to extend, not a forked canvas. And when you'd rather point your engineering capacity at your differentiator than at the editor around it. So if your situation lands in the first card, internal tool, or the editor is your product, build it. AI makes that more viable than it was 18 months ago. If it lands in the second, vendor UX is fine, a recurring license is fine, buy the platform. And if it lands in the third, customer facing, quality matters, extensibility matters, that's where buying an SDK pays off. The simplest way to describe Workflow Builder. It's reactflow wrapped in a black box that's ready for production, exposed as a clean API. You don't need to know which internal libraries we use for routing or layout, and you don't write the integration glue. You configure the editor through props and schemas, and it brings the rest. One thing worth pointing out, there's no execution engine in there. Workflow Builder is a front-end SDK. Your output is workflow JSON and your backend runs it. We never see your data, we don't host your workflows, and there's no SaaS dependency. It ships via NPM and it's fully extensible through the API. If you want source code access, the enterprise license includes it. But honestly, most teams never need it. The whole point is the black box plus an extension API. Full customization without inheriting a canvas codebase you didn't write. Let him give you two teams who took the SDK route. Different shapes, same logic. First, Athena Intelligence. They built AI for legal and renewable energy data intelligence, and their team needed a visual workflow editor inside their product. They had an investor demo coding app and no spare canvas engineering capacity to throw at it. They deployed Workflow Builder on a white label license. Working demo in a day. Full customization, the form logic, CSS adjustments, design tokens scoped to match their product. Done in a week. The win isn't really the building time they saved. It's that the senior engineering time those weeks would have eaten went into their core AI product instead. That's the opportunity cost made concrete. And it would have applied either way, whether they vibe coded the canvas in a week or did it carefully over a quarter. Second, Vercom. They run MessageFlow, an enterprise messaging platform, and they needed something called RCS Flow Studio, a no-code RCS campaign builder for their enterprise clients. Brand-consistent UX, RCS-specific node types, and deep integration with their existing Angular app. What pushed them off building it themselves was the mix of RCS-specific requirements and the Angular embed. The open-source libraries out there didn't have what they needed, and from scratch, this would have been a multi-quarter project, even with a strong team. They shipped on Workflow Builder, packaged as a web component so the Angular host could embed it natively. Custom RCS nodes, text, cards, a carousel with map, phone, and calendar suggestions, conditional decisions, HTTP requests, system actions. Token-based theming so it matched Vercom brand. Vercom is the harder case, honestly. Custom node types, custom theming, embedded in a host that isn't even React. If the SDK couldn't bend that far, they'd have been back to building it from scratch. It bent. If you're scoping this decision right now, maybe a week or 3 into we could just build it on reactflow, especially with AI, I'd offer one thing before you commit. Book a 30-minute consultation with us. It's free, and there's no sales pressure. The reason it's worth your time? We've shipped over 200 commercial workflow editors across 15 years of diagramming work. We've seen which decisions still hold up at 18 months and which ones end with people rotating off the canvas code because nobody wants to touch it. AI changed how fast you ship the first version. It didn't change which patterns survive year 3. If your situation looks like Athena's or Vercom's, we'll show you the path. And if it looks like the one of the build-it-yourself cases, an internal tool, or the editor is your product, we'll tell you that too. The decision is yours either way. The 30 minutes is just so you make it with better information than the README of a single library. If this was useful, subscribe. We publish breakdowns of workflow editors, diagramming UX, and the production layer most reactflow tutorials skip right past. Next up, how Athena Intelligence customized Workflow Builder in a week. Thanks for watching.